Use of cannabis here, I'm talking about the availability of knives to underage people. We're talking about video games, and yet, this kind of approach was dominating the kind of landscape of this era. And they got a little bit of kind of balance there, clearly a psychology professor going, which I think is more complex than that. But by and large, that was rare. Video games were evil. And the only thing that kind of moved on the press's obsession, I think, in Britain, was the advent of an even more kind of engaging enemy, which was the internet. But I think when the internet landed, you could feel the press rubbing their hands with glee. And the way, again, in which the internet was written about was almost as if it was this disembodied entity which had a life of its own. The kind of undertone was that the moment you plugged in your modem, it, in inverted commas, would get you. So it doesn't matter how well-rounded you were, or how well-adjusted you are, or where your moral compass lies, sooner rather than later, you will be watching hardcore pornography, you will be rubbing shoulders with paedophiles, whatever it was. The limits of their imagination knew no bounds. The internet was out there, it was seductive, it was going to get your children, it was going to warp your mind, it was going to make you watch stuff that currently you never dreamt of watching. And I used all of this to write my very, very first chapter, and it's still available, you can still get this. I think the book's available online actually as well. In a book called Ill Effects, I wrote a chapter that was very much around not just looking at these responses as to why in which the technology was demonized, why they were creating a witch hunt, but how it was that these kind of myths were allowed to perpetuate. And you can read it still. The chapter's called Invasion of the Internet Abusers, Marketing Misinformation on the Information Superhighway, or something like that. It's so old now, I can't remember. But it was my kind of approach to that. And I think it's quite interesting in relation to that key point in time. And it's interesting because it does still go on. We still get these stories. You only need to have a tragic high school massacre to find that yet again this scapegoating, this witch hunt goes on. It's either at the level of music, so it's Marilyn Manson is the problem, or video games. Doom was the game with the Columbine High School massacre that took the flak. And the kind of ridiculousness of some of the accusations, it was kind of accused, they were accused of constructing levels that they were playing that replicated the school as a kind of rehearsal of the atrocity that they were about to commit. So we still have these stories. So I guess the backdrop, because that is largely anecdotal, that's just my story of me writing a chapter. But what I'm doing here is just kind of getting you to think, I hope, about that link between fear, technology, society, okay? And we can then move into film. And maybe it's worth actually, before we kind of talk about how film reacted to this, so this is largely in the 80s, maybe it's worth just kind of looking at some of the technological developments aside from video and the internet that I think provide a kind of backdrop to this. I don't have a slide, so you can just kind of think about this, but have a think about that kind of rapid acceleration of technological advances. And I just noted some down here. So 1967, we got the first heart transplant. Okay. 1977, we got the first test tube baby. 1980s, we've got video technologies. Okay, and certainly in Britain, the video nasties debate is there. The market was flooded with stuff that allegedly involved real killings and snuff movies. 1984, first commercially available mobile phone. 1996, we cloned Dolly the sheep. Okay, so we're starting to move into the realms of science fiction here in our lifetime. Cryptocurrency emerges, in around about 2009. And I think most lately, if we're to look at this kind of long line of advances that feed into technophobia or have been appropriated by the press, I think the most interesting one is the emergence of the dark web. And this notion that beyond a space that has very little control is a space of absolutely no control, of pure chaos, of pure evil. The Silk Road, where you can buy a hitman or whatever Class A drug you want to consume and no one is going to know except you. It's a fascinating kind of development in society. So film, I said that film, I'll go to about 10:15, we'll have a little break. Film reacts in a really interesting way in terms of these anxieties. And I think for me, there's a number of key areas where cinema, certainly just before we hit the year 2000, really started to engage with these themes. And it crystallized around these 5 points, okay? So the notion of privacy, surveillance, and civil liberties. Because of course, the other thing that no one was talking about in this period is the enormous good that the internet was doing. That, groups who've never been able to have their voice heard politically, the Zapatistas in Mexico, for example, suddenly could use the internet to bring their cause to the world. And actually, the internet did a huge amount of good. So issues of privacy, surveillance, and civil liberties, questions around identity and the self, associations with deviancy, technology as isolationist, and then finally, technology is flawed. And again, these will map over to our kind of discussion of technoir today as well. So a number of films, I'm going to argue, emerged, particularly in the late 1990s, that all did something very, very similar. And I think absolutely the first kind of point of focus for the cinema was this notion of privacy and surveillance and people's civil liberties. And at the core of this is the notion of, does anyone know what this is? Well, it's a bloke's head. I'll talk about that in a minute. Is anyone aware of? Yeah, Panopticon.
Panopticon, cool. Okay,
yeah. Sorry, it's not the it's Jeremy Bentham. Absolutely. So for those who aren't aware, I think the Panopticon has become the central image of, or metaphor for, the power of surveillance in society. Yeah. Originally conceived by the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham, social reformist, in the 18th century. He kind of envisaged, and there's a real one down there in Cuba, I think it is, he envisaged a prison that was structured around a circular building. The cells are all on the outside of the wall, you can see that, okay, with bars facing a central tower that has windows all the way around it, yeah? Interestingly, when he died, he insisted, that's why I've got a picture of his head, that is literally his head. He insisted that his head be preserved so that in the future, if his friends missed him at parties, he could be brought back out again. And you could go visit his head. They don't have it on public display all the time, they only take it out every now and again. But that is literally Jeremy Bentham's head, preserved for all time. But I digress. So the Panopticon then was about control, because the idea was, if you had all your naughty criminals in these cells, all facing the guard tower in the middle, what naturally happens is each person automatically assumes they're the one being watched. And because of that, they behave, yeah? Because they implicitly sense that they are under observation, they're under surveillance, and if you're under surveillance, you don't misbehave. And what Bentham realized is sooner or later, you didn't actually have to have any guards in the control tower whatsoever, because the assumption was simply there, that I am being watched. So it's a fascinating kind of concept. And he actually realized that there was an application here for rather sinisterly, a huge number of different types of institutions. That you could use this for schools, for hospitals, for factories, yeah? In other words, any situation where a large number of people needed to be controlled and indoctrinated at the same time. And there's a number of films that I think deal with this. Most interestingly, I think, and one we'll have a look at, just the opening sequence is Enemy of the State, Tony Scott's film. Has anyone seen Enemy of the State? Yeah, this is absolutely a film, and it's a good film. It's a good film in which these questions about privacy and surveillance and control are at the forefront. So this is a film in which technology is used to hunt down the innocent. Technology is absolutely all-seeing, yeah. So there is nowhere to hide. And crucially, the technology resides in the hands of those who have power. Yeah? So the technology to control, the technology to observe, to listen in from the other side of the world, is in the hands of those with power. And in this film, what we see is that technology has kind of advanced to a point where the visible structures of that panopticon have disappeared altogether, yeah? And that information can be gathered and processed incessantly in real time, leaving people nowhere to hide and kind of no awareness of the degree to which their civil liberties and their privacy are being invaded, yeah? So we'll have a little look. If you look, this is just the opening credits of Enemy of the State. Just have a little look at what's being implied here, and I'll ask you to kind of talk about it maybe a little bit. Okay, so at the level of kind of mise-en-scène criticism and deconstructing the scene, what's the kind of key points maybe we want to draw out here?
You can run, but you cannot hide, surveilling.
Yeah, absolutely. The technology, you know, this is not technology that is on the ground or that you can look, you know, and it's down the road. This is above you. And there's a great sequence after this actually where you get these kind of very fluid shots of satellites being repositioned. So we know we're being watched, but we can't see it. You don't look up and see something floating above you. So good, I like that. What else is kind of in here? Yeah.
Vulnerability.
Go on, well, I've got three through us. I'll start.
I think the focus of there was like a point being made with the square focusing.
Yeah.
That basically something is chasing you.
Yeah, absolutely. That this is targeted.
That you can be identified and targeted.
Yeah,
it's a target. That's
yeah,
the word.
it's a target. Yeah, it's no different from what we might see through the scope of a sniper rifle. That we have the precision now to look down and see exactly where you are. It doesn't matter if you're inside a building or outside a building. The technology can strip away those layers.
The concern is there, really. I mean, the previous video game stuff was phobia. But I think with futuristic IT developments, the concern is there. I mean, there was just an article recently of China's police, for example, having spectacles that are a monitor, computerized monitor, and they actually look at the individuals in the street and can identify criminals in the filing system.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
basically, the policeman doesn't have to go back to the office and look at his PC anymore. It's over there in his specs, which is really, it's good for law enforcement, but it's scary because it puts a question mark on the power of the state, on the individual in the street.
It's being implied also in the shots of the Pentagon and the White House. And
Crucially, the association with technology and power is there, and the vibe, the level of the kind of non-diegetic sound, which is the only sound we've got. The implication is not that this is a good thing. The score is kind of ominous. It's powerful. It's driving forward, and individuals are trying to hide and fail time and time again. And yes, some of those are criminals, but the implication is there is no way to hide on this. So that's the first kind of concern that we see in this raft of movies here. The second one. What is the second one? Focuses on questions of identity, and the film I would point you to here, and unfortunately when I tried to read the clip earlier today I couldn't do it, but I urge you to look at Sandra Bullock in the film The Net, 1995. Okay. And the film very much, and I think absolutely Enemy of the State does the same thing. The film is concerned very much with the degree to which our identity is dependent on and open to manipulation by technological means. So in this film, Sandra Bullock, who's all very nice, because she's always very nice, that's what she does. I'd like to see her play a psychopath. I think it'd be great, like a proper stabby nut job. That's just me. But she's reinvented by technology. In the same way that Will Smith is reconstructed as a criminal. Okay, he's not a criminal, but if your criminal record on a computer says you're a criminal, that's it, you're a criminal. I'm just wondering if. I'm not going to be able to log on to the internet, am I? No, you'll have to. Unfortunately, you have to look at that in your own time. There's a scene very early on. This won't spoil it for anyone, where.
The Net you're talking about?
Yes.
Right, okay. I remember that in the cinemas.
Where Sandra Bullock is pushed off a boat, she bangs her head, and in the meantime, her whole identity has been digitally changed. So she goes to the hotel, and after being released from hospital, and says, "Yeah, I want to go to my room." And they put her name in, and it says, "No, there's no one staying here." And she knows she's staying there, and her bank card is compromised. Same thing happens with Will Smith. His whole life. His whole identity is compromised by technology's ability to reconstruct us throughout that. So issues of identity, and the Net is definitely one to look at. And then thirdly, this notion of technology as deviant, or able to serve kind of deviant means. I think the Truman Show, absolutely, because the Truman Show, I think it's heartbreaking. In terms of the abuse, maybe we talk number one with civil liberties. And yes, it's a funny film and it's kind of quirky, but the undertones and the implications are there. Truman is kept prisoner by technologies. He's not allowed to leave Sea Haven Island. The technologies will be deployed to stop him. They can control the weather. They can,
That's like Dark City as well.
Yes, I'm going to come to that one. In fact, that's a big case study in a bit. And that violation of human rights that we get in this film is for corporate profit. This is about Ed Harris, Christoph, clearly codified as kind of deviant. If we look at his clothing, we look at his mannerisms. He's very cleverly codified as kind of associating power, big business, and deviancy. And I guess that deviancy also, because he's kind of socially inadequate. as well. And I think we see that notion of technology as deviant in another film, again, of the same era. This is what's fascinating to me. It's all around this same period, which is the film Hackers from 1995. Has anyone seen Hackers? Yes. Yeah. The youngest, I don't know if it probably wasn't her first film, but it was her first film. Okay. I've got a clip from Hackers. So keep in mind that notion of technology and deviancy, technology and kind of subcultural identity. And this is a scene, it's about a bunch of computer geeks. When we start, one of them, because he's been naughty, one of them's been sent to some kind of rehab group because he's addicted to computers. But just have a look at in the terms of kind of costume, at the terms of the way this scene plays out. They're at a party. And think about this notion of technology and deviancy being somehow kind of linked hand in hand.
My name's Joey, but